Well, actor, filmmaker, and entrepreneur Edward Norton is now placing the spotlight on leadership teams through a $7.5 million investment led by Salesforce Ventures. Norton's software company Zeck is stepping outside the box with board meetings. Joining us here to discuss is Edward Norton, Zeck's co-founder. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
So Zeck is basically a different way to present ahead of board meetings, to disseminate the information that people absorb at board meetings.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think if you look at the way that we've transposed a lot of corporate functions, from fixed tools to cloud-based iterative software tools, no young company manages its cap table with Excel anymore. They do it on Carta, right? And you don't get FedExes full of legal documents with signature tabs. You get them in DocuSign, and this incredibly important function of organizations, and not just corporations, but nonprofit organizations, is its board, right? And it's supposed to be a very primary relationship, a relationship that's supposed to help advance the interests of the organization. And yet we still use these incredibly regressive tools. And I'll give an example. I recently got on a board I sit on a 90-page PDF that was sent to me, about 36 hours before the meeting. You slog through it with no capacity whatsoever to ask a question, query, flag anything, vote on a minutes approval or something offline. You get into the meeting, and we had the CEO read us back, across 4 hours, the thing we'd read verbatim, because he has no idea what we've read or what we've ingested. And this is absurd in 2024, and it actually, I think it wastes human capital. It promotes kind of negative relationships between management and board. And I think most management of most organizations will tell you that the 2 weeks that they go pencils down to get ready for a board meeting, they just want to punch themselves in the face. And I think a lot of people have said to me, you have a really interesting day job. Why are you working on a board management software?
This was my interest. I was interested, Edward, you're best known as an actor.
Yeah.
What got you interested in a software startup focused on board governance?
Well, it's a fair question. I mean, you guys know, because I've talked with Yahoo about it. I started a media analytics company called EDO that's become a major measurement partner of the streaming services and all of the networks and the buy-side marketers. We sit in the outcomes and performance measurement space, and I had started a company that did crowdfunding for charities called CrowdRise that merged with GoFundMe many years ago. And across these experiences, I ended up sitting on corporate boards. I started companies that had boards with venture capitalists on them, and then I ended up sitting on boards like GoFundMe's board. And I've sat on nonprofit boards for 30 years. My theater company, my housing finance organization I love, and conservation organizations. And I've literally lived within these dynamics, and I've seen really positive relationships between management and boards, and I've seen completely terrible, toxic ones. And I think my partners and I really felt like this is a ubiquitous pain point. This is a big elephant in the room that everybody knows is a big problem and nobody is dealing with. And so we tried to envision what would this look like if it was working. And Zeck already, I have to say, for something that sounds as boring and esoteric as board management software, we are getting responses to it that are actually emotional. The level of gratitude we're getting for sort of building a better mousetrap for helping this process. And actually from both sides of the table, we've had capital management groups and CEOs saying, this has radically improved not just the quantitative amount of time we waste getting ready for this or in the meeting itself, but it's actually changing the qualitative aspects of the relationship and making the meetings much more forward-looking as opposed to reading through what's happened in the last 6 months.
I mean, it's interesting because the cynic in me thinks maybe some of the friction was by design in some cases, right? I think more of the sort of shareholder company relationship and shareholder meetings, and that is still a very antiquated system.
Yes, it could be, and I won't try to reform that one. But
not yet.
No, but if you think about it, yes, there's a governance function, especially for very large companies, But fundamentally, I think companies should be able to expect a reciprocal obligation with their board. Boards are there to serve the company. And think about how insane it is that in 2024, that I would send to you a platform of information and documents and things you're supposed to digest, and I can't even see, I have no access to data on how much my own board has interacted with what I've sent out. Zeck lets management see precisely how many minutes every single individual board member spent in every section. They can be queried by that board member with questions and refinements, either privately or within the group. You can do governance functions like voting. You know, on average in board meetings, nearly an hour is spent on governance functions like employee stock option approvals and minutes approvals. Do you know how, I mean, these are high quality people with a lot of better use of their time than voting aye around a table. You should be able to do that from the airport terminal, which is, by the way, we find 80% of most board materials are read on mobile. And yet no one's formatted it for that. You wouldn't read Axios or the New York Times or Yahoo on a PDF that you have to pinch scroll into. You read it in a mobile format. And that's how if 80% of your board members are reading the stuff you send them on phones and on tablets, obviously it should be formatted for that. And obviously, I think these things are intuitively obvious when you say them, but no one had done it. So we just decided we're going to fix this.
I'm interested because, there's a lot of successful actors who now have, lack of a better word, kind of a side hustle, but one that, obviously you're passionate about this, right? But you see it with, it's Ryan Reynolds and Ashton Kutcher. It's not a new trend, but is it more of a do you think it's more of a pronounced one now? And what would be the reasons?
I can't really speak to that. I mean, the stuff you're talking about is, I would categorize more as investing. Investing and aligning or making partnership deals. I've done some investing, but I've sort of, I worked in kind of an esoteric corner of finance when I got out of college in affordable housing tax credit finance, and I've always been interested in starting organizations, whether it's theater companies or companies, and some of it is just that I like, the famous doctor and pioneer in global health, Paul Farmer, was a friend of mine, and he used to say the most fun thing in the world is solving hard problems with friends, and I agree with that, and I think envisioning a problem that needs to be solved and coming up with either a service or a solution, it's not as divergent from telling stories in films as you would think. It is at the beginning anyway. It's a very creative experience, and it is. A lot of what we're doing right now is we're storytelling. We're talking about why would someone else have empathy with this problem, or you're actually trying to show people you've got empathy with the problem they've got, and that draws them into what you're doing. And so for me, it's not as hardcore a left brain, right brain dichotomy as it might seem. But I can't explain it. It's I never got into the arts because I wanted it to be a 9-to-5 day job. To me, that ebbs and flows with inspiration and opportunity, and it leaves a lot of space for me to do other things I'm interested in, like this. But it's funny. Like, I've known Mark Benioff, who founded Salesforce, the great cloud computing software company, and I've always really liked Mark. He has an ethos of He has a corporate ethos that I really admire. He talks a lot about stakeholder capitalism as opposed to just shareholder capitalism, where you look at your environment, your employees, your community equally with share price and I admire that. And I never bothered Mark about this, but we did cultivate a relationship with Salesforce's venture team because we felt more than any just pure investor, we really liked the idea of working with the kingpins of value-added cloud-based software, and our DNA, the fact that they've made this vote of confidence in us and given us just some capital to scale with and stuff is pretty thrilling to us, because we really feel an alignment with them, both in terms of they have a better understanding of the business, these kinds of businesses, but they also have cultivated, I think, what I would call they have a more humanistic view even of the way corporations are supposed to function, and we are actually trying to promote better relationships between managements and their boards and vice versa. And so we're pretty excited to work with them on this. It was great that they stepped up to this.
Mark Benioff in Salesforce, not the ventures, but overall, is also well known as being very acquisitive. Do you have an end game for Zeck where you would sell it to a company like Salesforce, or?
It's premature in a way. I mean, I think we're literally just getting going. We have, it's been a real rocket ship. We've had, just by talking about this problem, not even talking about our product, talking about the problem of why board dynamics are toxic, we've been invited into lots of forums, from YPO to Tech All-Stars, Tiger 20. We've gone, and the response has just been absolutely off the charts. People are really frustrated by this problem, and I think it was affirming to us. And we had hundreds of nonprofits and thousands of companies sign up for this really quickly, and and that's exciting. Right now, we're just trying to get more people aware of it and stuff like that. I think we're a long way from that phase.
Yeah.
I think, but I don't. It's funny. Like some people, when we built CrowdRise, which was a really great social fundraising site for nonprofit organizations, and GoFundMe was doing the same thing, except I'm helping my friend whose house burned down. Some people were telling us, go it alone. It'd be your own thing, and I don't know. I have a little bit of I think John D. Rockefeller was right in some ways about the power of the combination, he used to call it, with Standard Oil. And I think sometimes, we live in this world that's informed by Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and these kind of titans, and this whole generation of entrepreneurs is unicorn or bust, or I'm going to go thing. And I don't think that's very mature. I think there are a lot of businesses that benefit enormously at some point from rolling into some sort of a conglomerate structure, and they have made a great product, but they may not be literally a sector unto themselves. And I think there's a lot of people who probably wish they'd sold their companies earlier than they did, right before we went through some gigantic down cycle where valuations dropped off and capital dried up. You know what I mean? So I think one benefit of being the age I'm at and having done other things in my life is you don't necessarily hitch your ego to the idea of some infinite outcome or maximalization. And I think, to your point, sometimes you really got to look at it and say, is what we're doing really successful but niche? And so we should align, or have you built something that's standalone? I mean, GoFundMe is a phenomenal organization. It's one of the most interesting companies I've ever been involved with. It's providing this huge social service, which is moving between $4 and $5 billion a year in very small increments to charitable purpose without taking any deduction away from it.
Right.
And it's not a hypergrowth company, perhaps, but it's an incredibly great self-sustaining company that's filling a real service. And I think,
so if you can achieve that,
yeah, exactly.
then
I don't think you can ever say one size fits all with things. And I think you just sort of have to feel it out as you go. But right now, what I can say that we're excited about is, like I said, it's actually kind of wild to get kind of a certain amount of emotion and gratitude back. You think software sounds very clinical, but I do think we're taking something that was none of us set off to say my aspiration is I'm going to be a great builder of board deck slides. You know what I mean?
But
and if you can liberate people from the part of their day or their week or their month that's pretty onerous, I think that's nice.
Yeah. Edward Norton,
Yeah.
thanks so much for coming in.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.